For the second year in a row, Xbox Game Pass missed its growth targets. You have probably heard me say on this channel, if you've been a subscriber for a while, that Xbox Game Pass goes right up to the top level at Microsoft. It's not just an Xbox isn't just a little thing happening over here. This is valuated at the CEO level, and the way that we know that is because every year Microsoft is required to file a proxy statement, typically called the 14A, that outlines how executive compensation is going to work. And we can always look at the CEO, Satya Nadella, and see how he is likely to be compensated for the year ahead and understand where their objectives are. For an outside observer, if you want to understand what Microsoft cares about, just look and see how the CEO is compensated, because that will break down where his objectives are going to be for the year ahead. And so Microsoft has filed this 14A document, and it outlines how Satya Nadella's compensation and bonus is going to be structured and was paid out for the previous year. And as we have found out and can dig through the details, for the second year in a row, Xbox Game Pass did not meet its growth objectives. So what does this mean? Is Game Pass in trouble? Let's just dive in. So first off, here is the actual document, and the key part I've highlighted there on the right. So what this is showing out is the actual breakdown of Satya Nadella's compensation bonus targets. And you can get into all the weeds if you really want, and just pause it here if that's your thing. But what I want to point out here is that highlighted section, they were looking for a 72% growth, and they got 28%, which means that if he would have got 72% growth like they had targeted, then he would have gotten 100% of that allocation of that bonus section, which means he would have got 10% of the total compensation for that bonus. It gets real complicated, but just know that Microsoft wanted more growth in Xbox Game Pass, and they came up, honestly, it looks like pretty short. Now the question becomes is like, hey, does this mean Game Pass is in trouble? Like, is Microsoft, this is the second year in a row that they set out lofty objectives and they failed to meet them. And I mean, at some point you got to raise the question. So I don't think that is even close to the case. There is a lot of evidence to suggest otherwise. First of all, the product did grow. Like, it grew 28%. Yeah, Microsoft wanted more. Everybody would want more inside of Microsoft. But it only grew at 28%. And also, that really does justify and explain why Microsoft hasn't been just vomiting out at every corner how many Game Pass subscribers they have. Because if it's only growing at 28%, it takes a while for it to really add up. Because the last number they announced was in January, I believe, with 25 million subscribers to Xbox Game Pass. Now, if you take that 25 million and look at a 28% growth rate, you're looking, well, like 2.5 times 3, that's what, like 7 million, somewhere around there, if we're rounding numbers here, for a year. Now, don't use those numbers in verbatim or anything else like that, but that just kind of puts into perspective that in a year, then they would be at about 32 million. And so I suspect that growing Xbox Game Pass has really turned into be much harder than Microsoft actually anticipated. I think that's some of the fallout here from this. And now, there's other evidence that suggests that Microsoft is not backing away, and we all know that because of a little thing called Activision Blizzard and $70 billion dues. That acquisition is going to play a big part in trying to grow that growth rate, and Microsoft obviously very fundamentally believes that this is the best way to do that. They can clearly likely see that hey, we drop a whole bunch of games, of high value games I should add, in the Game Pass, we see growth. It's not hard to conceptualize that. And so just kind of keep that in mind here. Also, other things that Microsoft has acknowledged is we got to take a step back and remember that Xbox Game Pass isn't just cloud gaming. A lot of times, and I'm sometimes guilty of this, you think of Xbox Game Pass, you think of just the cloud streaming. And Microsoft has very clearly said multiple times, especially in their regulatory filings, that cloud adoption is low. And so at this point, we consider just the cloud adoption just a nice little bonus feature that you get, the little cherry on top of to your Xbox Game Pass, which includes the breadth and catalog of games. And so just keep that in mind, the point being that it sounds like cloud adoption or cloud gaming is definitely not driving adoption of Xbox Game Pass, at least not yet. Now, will the new pieces of hardware that have come out, change that narrative, like the Logitech G Cloud or the Razer Edge? I don't personally think so. I don't think that those will change the narrative too much. But for Microsoft, it's like, hey, we'll definitely support that. And there we go. And we also know like the Keystone, which is probably why Microsoft canceled the device. So you got, on one hand, you got low cloud adoption, and Microsoft's like, let's launch a cloud-only thing. And like it just, the marriage isn't there yet for Microsoft to do that sort of thing. And they partnered with Samsung, and that narrative started to play itself out. Now, there's other interesting information in this 14A document that I want to point out here, because this is a statement. I always look for the Activision stuff. I looked for it in their earnings, and I obviously looked for it here. I just found this somewhat interesting. Microsoft said in this statement, and in January of 2022, we announced our agreement to acquire Activision Blizzard as an investment to make it easier for people to play great games however, whenever, and wherever they want. I screwed up that order a little bit. We expect the transaction will increase innovation in content creation and reduce constraints, keyword, reduce constraints on distribution. It also significantly expands our presence in mobile, the largest segment of gaming in the gaming business. Now, we've talked quite a bit about the mobile side, and Microsoft wants to build out a mobile app store for games and all that stuff. But the interesting part to me is reducing the constraints on distribution. I'm curious where Microsoft is coming at from that specific angle, because right now they already have a pretty solid pipeline. They know how to launch games on Steam. They know how to launch games on consoles, obviously, and in the cloud. I'm curious if Activision has some nice technology under the hood that maybe makes that process a little more streamlined that will be acquired as part of this. You got to imagine that Activision is probably pretty good at building games for multiple platforms at this point in its history. And so I just thought that was just a notable little segment from this. So other things to point out from this statement. Microsoft is obviously not meeting objectives, which means they're having a significant might be overselling, but a challenge growing the platform, because for multiple reasons. One, it's expensive in general to launch a subscription service. That's just the nature of them, convincing people to buy in. Number two, you got to have a massive catalog. You got to do that. Microsoft does have a good catalog, but I wouldn't say it's the best in the industry, at least not yet. Once they close the Activision acquisition, then you could make a potential argument that they had the best catalog in the industry. But then you also have to maximize the endpoints. And there's not many companies out there that I honestly think could do this. Obviously, Microsoft can, and in my opinion, they are leading the way in the game subscription genre, if you will. Sony probably could. Sony definitely has a tier 1 catalog by all means. They likely have the funds to be able to do it, but it's risky. As we can already see, it is a long, slow process to grow that. And you've got to be willing to kind of fall on the sword of your exclusive titles to really get people in there. Now, Sony has launched a subscription service. I would put it like a peg below what Microsoft has done, because Microsoft is really all in on like the day availability exclusives on Game Pass. So, and Sony isn't really going that route. Other contenders, Netflix, we know, is going to try at least a cloud gaming model. Don't forget that Netflix did have, I don't think they still do this anymore. They had a game subscription program where you actually physically got discs and all that back in the day. Apple is doing this on mobile, right? They have their arcade stuff where you can play things like $6 a month and unlimited access to their specific games, not the entire catalog. Google wanted to, but that obviously is not going to happen. And Facebook is just like, would anybody trust Facebook to try to do this? They could do it. They're too happy trying to build legs in the metaverse than build out anything, I don't know, that people really truly want to use. Yeah, I said it. So my big takeaway from, basically looking into this document and the whole 14A narrative is just it's tough, it's expensive, and it takes a seriously long time to hit scale. Xbox Game Pass has been around for several years at this point, and they're just now probably, I would estimate they're probably somewhere around 25, well, we know 25, but probably around that 30 million mark. That would probably be where I would expect Microsoft to announce things next. But obviously, it takes a very, very long time. But for Microsoft, and one of the things that is really interesting here, obviously we know that Microsoft is battling it out on the courts. One of the things that sometimes regulators will watch for is Microsoft launching these services at a loss, meaning are they funding it with like Azure and Office and everything else to prop up Xbox so that they can grab market share? Because that's not technically, but I mean, it could be looked as anti-competitive, because if you're a new entrant into the market, like you don't have that cash flow on the other side. It's either win or die. And Microsoft looks at this segment as a must win, but we keep hearing Phil Spencer say, like, look, Game Pass is we make money from it. It's not operating at a loss. And I think that's strategic. I really, really do. I think it's strategic that he keeps reiterating that point to show that Xbox is sustainable on its own, but it's not requiring that Windows still exists so that it can get funds from that or can come on over. Now, you can't ignore the fact that they would not be able to buy Activision Blizzard without those other orgs, right? The other business units, because it's, at the end of the day, it's $70 billion. But Microsoft looks at this Xbox service model as a must-win. I've heard this multiple times that this is a must-win category, and that is why they're going to go in spend $70 billion dues. That is why it's heavily so pressured on Satya Nadella's compensation. There you go. It's just that's the 14A. And that's the CEO's compensation. And that's a lot of just kind of digging through the weeds of what's going on actually with Xbox Game Pass. And if you want to stay up to date to everything else happening in the world of Microsoft, Xbox, and beyond, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.